So often when people have a difficult relationship with voices where the voices are causing distress, you can often see that the voices have quite a lot of power in the person's life, whether it's by threatening them or being controlling and demanding, or it could also be by distracting the person from the rest of their lives. So the voices might be very compelling or need a lot of attention in whatever way, and the person is just sort of caught in trying to meet the needs of the voices all the time. So there's a power imbalance, and I think one of the big things of working in a relational way is trying to create a more equal way of relating, kind of like you would with a good friend or with somebody you respect, so creating more respect in the relationship.
Often when I meet people, their main way to try and cope with a domineering voice is to try and ignore the voice. Some people are also then doing what the voice wants them to do. So the voice might be asking them to self-harm. The person might try and ignore it, and then do what the voice is asking. Helping somebody change that relationship, I think it's a gradual process, because it's a bit like the person's almost like in a childlike role with an adult who's dominating them. And how can they grow, sort of thing, to start realising they have choices in this relationship. One of the things I've used with people is not to actually focus on the voice, but to focus on other relationships that have been domineering. You can use the empty chair technique, where you create a chair. If the person, say, has been dominated by a father figure, they can create an empty chair for the father figure and confront them, say, I'm an adult now, you treat me really badly, I'm not happy with it, I'm angry about it, and I'm not going to let other people treat me like that again. And by saying these kind of affirming, assertive things to the memory of the domineering person, they can be more assertive with the voice. Sometimes the voice relaxes as well, so different things can happen. But so role playing, being more assertive, but not directly with the voice straight away, but can really help them. And the other thing I'd say is about compromises. So if a voice wants you to self-harm, can you write about your pain?
I've done drawings and paintings so rather than doing what the voices showed me that I needed to do, I would paint it as a sort of compromise. So I would spend a lot of time with these images that the voices were talking about. And so in some ways I was listening and giving attention to the voices, and that in itself seemed to sort of calm them down a bit, but not actually doing the self-harm. Some people compromise by, if the voice wants them to hurt themselves in some way, they find ways that are less problematic to hurt themselves. There's things like holding ice or eating wasabi. Elastic bands. Somebody talked about the voice wanting them to touch a hot plate, and instead of touching it, they would just do it very quickly.
I know somebody who the voice was telling them to hang themselves, and they kind of role played it. They didn't do it, but they role played it, and that was very releasing for them. And the voice was. So it's kind of playing with it rather than actually doing it.
I think the important thing for me with power is we're trying to like almost switch this like hierarchy kind of relationship into more of a cooperative relationship. And when there's like a powerful voice and a sort of subordinate receiver of that voice or hearer of that voice, what can happen when is that person like can shift into trying to overpower the voice as well, but all we're doing is really just shifting the balance along the same kind of spectrum, if that makes sense. So I think we just got to be a bit careful that we're not just kind of just changing the roles, really, like becoming overpowering of the voice, and just trying to move to more of a cooperative relationship. So just being careful if we are being like assertive, not to almost go too far and become aggressive and almost like an abuser or a persecutor of the voice, because I think people, because essentially you're just stimulating the same system, the same emotions for people, just in the other reverse order.
With one person whose voice was telling them they had to go and kill their boss, their ex-boss, he did a kind of variation of the empty chair. So he went, after coming to the group, he went home and did a role play where he imagined his boss in a chair. He put some cushions there, and he confronted his boss about how he treated him, and then I think he took an implement and beat the cushions. And the voice was really happy with that. With somebody else, the voice was telling him not to go to the Hearing Voices group, but they found that we looked, well, maybe there's a need for predictability, and that if you let your voice know exactly what's going to happen in the day, that will help the voice feel more comfortable. And that's what he has found, is that when he lets the voice know exactly what's going to happen, the voice is a lot less critical. And
that's really like tuning into the needs of the voice. Like what's the feeling that's driving the voice? What are the kind of needs? Trying to listen to what the voice wants, or what it's trying to achieve, or what role it's playing. And if we can start getting into some kind of understanding, or at least exploring that, then that really guides the way of how we can help that relationship. And yeah, and there's a couple of times that in therapy where someone has been working with a very domineering, powerful voice, and so we've had to have some ways of relating to that, like standing firm, being assertive, holding your own. When we've started seeing what's behind the voice, looking, what's quite needy or maybe quite vulnerable behind the voice, there's maybe a different type of relationship we can bring to that as well. So we've got the kind of, almost like self-defense, standing your ground with this very hostile, attacking part, but gradually over time starting to look behind that of what the needs and the function and the emotional vulnerability that's sitting there. And then the relationship can start shifting a little bit to trying to address those needs.
The core of a lot of these things is thinking about what is making me scared. Why am I scared of this voice and what it's saying? What is creating all this fear, and how can we reduce fear? So some of the things we've talked about is by compromising, we're creating a sense of choice. So I think that's a big one in terms of having less fear, that you have a sense of choice. Also, what's coming out is something about when we have more understanding, when we have more information about what's going on and more understanding, that can help reduce fear as well. Another thing that can help reduce fear is that sense of being able to stand your ground. So that sense, both physically and mentally, that you have the strength to meet something face on, and not having to submit or end up in a heap on the floor, or just do whatever you're told. So that sense of confidence and strength and courage, probably.
Yeah. There's something that we do in compassion focused therapy, which is the approach that I've been using a lot, where we almost like try and build up a character that has the qualities that are required to do what's required, in relation to the voice. So we really spend time almost trying to train up what we can call the compassionate self, or might be called a wise self, or it might be called a grounded self, or whatever seems to work for that person. But almost we spend a lot of time tuning in to creating a character or a self-identity that can do the thing that's required, which might be to be able to feel strong enough to stand the ground in relation to the voice, or it might be that's able to really try and care for and look after something that's feeling quite scared. So a lot of attention in compassion focused therapy is paid to almost like that training bit, training up the character that can do what's required in relation to what's needed.
Because sometimes we don't, as we grow up in schools and in families, we don't always learn certain relational skills. So sometimes as adults we have to teach ourselves, or with help from others, we have to learn different ways of relating so that we have more choice in relationships and we can feel more confident in how we relate. That's something I've learned from having to learn to relate to different voices, is that I've actually been able to transfer that to relating to people. So by having to find out how to relate to abusive voices or tricky voices or jester voices or crying voices, it's given me more confidence in my life having to deal with people.